Welcome students. In this video, we are going to discuss about the breathing and exchange of gases. Let's start with the term respiration. Respiration is the oxidation of nutrients in the living cells to release the energy for biological work. Breathing is the exchange of oxygen from atmosphere with carbon dioxide produced by the cell. In different organisms, we find different respiratory organs like general body surface in lower invertebrates like sponges, coelentrates, flatworms, etc. Whereas skin of moist cuticle is being used by earthworm, leech, amphibians. Tracheal tubes are used by insects, centipede, millipede, spider. Gills are used by fishes, tadpoles, and prawns, which are aquatic in nature. And finally, the lungs, which is also known as pulmonary respiration, that is being used by most of the vertebrates. Let's start with the human respiratory system. Human respiratory system is composed of air tract where the air passes and the pair lungs where the exchange of gases takes place with alveoli and the blood vessels. Air passage, which is also known as air tract. This one is the conducting part of air. It helps in transport atmospheric air into the alveoli. It also helps in clearing air from the foreign particles. And lastly, it humidifies and brings the air to the body temperature. These are the parts of air passage, which includes external nostril. From external nostrils to the nasal passage. From nasal passage, air reaches to the nasal chamber. From there, it reaches to nasopharynx, glottis. It passes from larynx, trachea, primary bronchi. Then it reaches to the secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, bronchioles, and finally to the terminal bronchioles, to the respiratory bronchiole, and finally the air reaches to alveolar duct. So here it is. Once the air reaches to trachea, to the primary bronchus. Primary bronchus divides into bronchioles, secondary bronchus, then to tertiary bronchiole, and then it has the respiratory bronchioles, which are at the edge of alveolar sac. Here you can see to the alveolar duct. Each terminal bronchiole give rise to many thin and vascularized alveoli. Alveoli are the structural where the exchange of gases takes place. Larynx, which is also known as a sound box or a voice box, is cartilaginous box which help in sound production. During swallowing, there is a glottis which is closed by epiglottis, a thin elastic cartilaginous flap that prevents the entry of food into the larynx. Then comes the trachea. All bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete, which is C-shaped cartilaginous half rings. Then comes the lungs in the human respiratory system. Lungs are situated in thoracic cavity, which is thoracic chamber, and rest on the diaphragm. Right lung has 3 lobes, 1, 2, and 3. Left lung has only 2 lobes. Each lung is covered by a double layered pleura, which is outer parietal pleura and inner is visceral pleura. The pleural fluid present in between these two layers helps in lubricating the surface of the lungs and prevents friction from the membranes. Lungs are made up of bronchi plus bronchioles plus alveoli. So lung contain bronchi, bronchioles and the alveoli. Alveoli and other ducts together form a respiratory part, or it is also known as exchange part of respiratory system. Alveoli are the structural and functional unit of lungs. Like hemoglobin is a structural and functional unit of, it's the respiratory pigment, right, for exchange of gases, oxygen, carrying oxygen and delivering oxygen to the tissues where the aerobic respiration takes place. But for lungs, it is alveoli that are the structural and functional unit. Here comes the steps of respiration. In respiration, the steps involve pulmonary ventilation, that is breathing. The pulmonary ventilation here indicates lungs. The nostrils, bronchi, trachea, involvement of all this for ventilation, that is breathing. Then the gaseous exchange between lungs, alveoli and the blood takes place. So first the air enters through our respiratory system, that is external respiratory system, nostrils, air passage basically. Then that air reaches to the lung, alveoli, and where the exchange of gases takes place between the lung alveoli and the blood. From there, the gas transports, that is oxygen transport and carbon dioxide is transported, or the exchange, like carbon dioxide is moved out through the diffusion to the alveoli and oxygen is poured into the, added into the blood. And that oxygen transportation now reaches to the tissue via blood, where again the gaseous exchange takes place between the blood and the tissues. Finally, the oxygen that reaches to tissue or the cell will lead to cellular respiration, where oxygen is utilized for breakdown of simple food to release energy. So these are the steps of respiration. Through pulmonary ventilation, gaseous exchange between lungs and alveoli take place, right? Alveolar lung, alveoli and the blood take place. Then gas transport, that is oxygen transportation and carbon dioxide transportation takes place between the blood and tissues. And finally, that leads to the initiation of cellular or the tissue respiration. Thanks for your attention.